The person
It's
said,
called ignorance.
she suggested I had three.
But realistically,
Listen, I got
how
thrown
does
out
any
of
of
a
us
So if we're
genetics
like
class
this,
by making a
then I do
snide
like this,
comment.
look.
Unless you be in
Basketball
communication,
players.
that's
Didn't look very
prohibited.
tall
We
on
also
the 12-inch
trying to
screen.
Okay.
you know.
Okay, guys, welcome everyone. We're going to study about prayer today, and hopefully we're going to go through two different.
Oh,
Mishnah.
I didn't get one of these.
Here you go. Two different Mishnayot from Pirkei Avot, Avot 1:2 and Avot 2:18. Okay, so let's start with the first one.
Shimon the righteous was from the remnants of the great assembly. He would say, on three things the world stands, on the Torah, on the service, and on acts of loving kindness.
Okay,
Thank you.
do you know that one? Al Torah, Al Avodah, Ve'at Milut Chasidim. There is a song.
Yep, yep.
Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, Ha'olam Ha'olam Omer. Al Torah, Ve'al Avodah, Ve'al Gemilut Chasadim. Al Torah, Ve'al Avodah, Ve'al Gemilut Chasadim. It's a very famous Hasidic song. This one is taken from this text from the Mishnah. So the three things the world stand on the Torah, on the service, and on acts of loving kindness. Now it's a tricky translation because here it says on the Torah, on the service, and on acts of loving kindness. In Hebrew it says ala Torah, but that one is easy. Ve'al ha'avodah.
That's work.
That's work, avodah. But the origin of the word avodah actually means the work of the temple, of the sacrifices. And gemilut chasadim is the act of loving kindness, that for sure. So basically, if I have to translate it differently, this should read, on three things the world stand, on the Torah, on the sacrifices, and on act of loving kindness. Bear that in mind, because it's very important. The alternative translation that I just presented is very important to understand this.
Okay, green with purple stripes, I don't care.
Oh, let's see if it's working.
Yeah.
Kind of works, but it's in... Okay, very little delay, like that. And that's me, it's just one person watching. Okay, so let's start reading. Shelley, before you do that, sorry.
It's quite all right. I didn't need it anyway.
Let's study a little bit about our Rabbi Shimon the righteous, and here is Shimon HaTzadik. Text you.
Very few of the people in the Mishnah or Talmud are given honorary titles such as Sadiq, righteous one. Thus, the appearance of the designation Sadiq, appended to the name of Shimon, is very high praise. None of the 120 members of the Great Assembly were replaced when they died, so that their numbers constantly shrank due to the attrition of time and morality.
Mortality.
Mortality, excuse me.
But
Well, it
that
could have
was
been
good,
morality
yeah.
too, but you never know. This is what is meant by Shimon being one of the last remaining members of that august group. Shimon was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest in the beginning of the Second Temple era. The Talmud relates how he greeted Alexander the Great, then the latter reached Jerusalem in about 330 BCE. Shimon made such a profound impression upon the young conqueror of the then known world that Alexander spared Jerusalem the destruction he visited upon the other cities occupied by his army. Besides being high priest in the temple, Shimon also appears to have been the temporal leader of the Jewish community. If so, then he set a precedent that 2 centuries later would spark civil war among the Jews. The concentration of spiritual and temporal power in the hands of one individual has always been questionable. Power corrupts. In the hands of Shimon, who was a tzaddik, the situation caused no harm, and in fact was beneficial in helping the fledgling Jews state overcome the internal and external problems it faced, since it eliminated the competitive power bases and personal jealousies and concentration of power.
You skipped the line.
Peak.
I must have said jealousies and peak. However, in the hands of lesser men, such as the Hasmonean king Alexander Yanai, such concentration of power proved to be the most injurious to both the temporal and spiritual well-being of the Jewish commonwealth. King Yanai was vain and imperious to the authority of the great sages. When they dared to correct his excesses, he responded with a wholesale slaughter that nearly wiped out all of the greatest Torah authorities of the age.
Yeah. So basically, remember, this case is almost like it's okay. This was a good guy. That's why they gave him the title of tzaddik. But you know the story of Hanukkah, the Hasmonean family. They also concentrated both powers. They were priests and leaders, and eventually it became so corrupted that was the beginning of the end. So the rabbis are very cautious about the concentration of spiritual and secular power all in once. But it looks like this one was an exception, and he was recognized as a scholar and a pious person.
Until the Hasmonean revolt, was the Second Commonwealth completely independent, or are they always subject to some conquering power?
Because this was the Greeks.
Yeah, that's who. But I mean, when the Jews were allowed to return from Persia, they were still subject.
Because even in this time, he wasn't autonomous.
No. Because for a while there, until the Hasmoneans, didn't the external powers say that the high priest has secular authority as well? You know, I mean, I'm not sure.
I think it didn't happen until the Hasmoneans.
Oh.
That it was in.
But then they were independent for a while under Hasmoneans, you know, weren't they?
Yes. Yes, they were for a while.
Does the Torah anywhere expressly prohibit somebody from being both a high priest and king? Is there anything expressly in the Bible against that?
Not like that, but because the kings, except for Saul, right? Then the idea was that it was going to be a continuation from the house of David.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
you
yeah.
wouldn't be in a situation where the king and the high priest would be the
Oh,
same,
no.
because we come from different tribes.
That's right.
That's the thing.
You have a similar situation in modern day Israel between the Rabbanim and the secular government.
Yeah,
Well, it's a coalition, I mean, it's a compromise.
but back in the day, they didn't believe in compromising.
Yes,
They
it was one or the other.
They were expecting that the priests will be as pious as the rabbis.
It's not an easy compromise, let's face it. Question.
That's how it works.
The
two.
number 120,
Shimon HaTzadik.
That's the Knesset.
the number 120, the members of the Great Assembly.
Yes.
That's an interesting number,
Why?
because we always talk, you should, so late Biscola, the 120 years of life,
Well, but it's,
120 anniversaries, etc.
But I can tell you
So
that
all of these
we have-
numerologies,
We have 120 seats in the Knesset in Israel because of them.
because of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. In fact,
At the beginning.
historically, archaeologically,
Oh.
it's not even clear if they ever existed,
Yes, certainly.
the Anshe Knesset at Gedola. The men of the Great Assembly, it's not clear if they were real. As an institution, they would get together as a council.
Before the Sanhedrin was created, wasn't there a body known as the Jerusia that, I've heard that expression, I don't know if you're familiar with it, that
No.
maybe helped the high priest, how do you spell Grusia, I think, I don't know.
Gerusia?
Gerusia, yeah, I don't know where I heard that.
Doesn't ring a bell, but that doesn't mean anything.
Huh.
Because I
Okay.
don't think of,
Let's continue with text 3. Eddie, I just realized that I think I put that source twice, but that doesn't matter. Okay, text 3.
Our sages taught that before chastising others, one must rebuke himself, making sure that his own moral house is in order. Talmud, Babylonia, Bava Metzia, 107b. A leader's personal deportment must serve as an example of the type of behavior he asks of others. Thus the expression, Hu Haya, means he became. Right. Shimon embodied the lesson he wished to preach, internalizing it and living up to the ideas he expected of others, and only then, Omer, would he say to them, Omer, would he say to them,
Very
would he
interesting
say to
because
them.
in the Hebrew, yes, of course, in English you said he will say. Doesn't tell you much, but in Hebrew is it Hu Haya Omer.
walk the walk,
Sorry?
walk the walk.
Yeah, but Hu Haya, this is the rabbis call it homiletic interpretation. So Hu Haya Omer, they split it into two halves. Hu Haya and then Omer. First he became. Hu Haya means he was. If out of context, of course. In Hebrew, Hu Haya, he was. So basically, as saying that whatever he's going to say to the people, he became that first.
Uh-huh.
Very interesting. Okay, there is another one. Let me see if I found it. I put it there without even realizing that I was going to put it. Text 13. Text 13. Let's do that. Let's do that again. Eddie, if you want to read it, so it will make sense to be read by the same person.
The expression Hu Haya Omer, he used to say, suggests a monologue, not a dialogue. Shimon HaTzadik related to himself the basic thoughts stated in this Mishnah.
Okay, it's a similar concept. Almost like before telling that to other people, he told that to himself. But it's the same idea. First you change, and then from that place, you have the moral authority to tell that to others. Because this kind of Mishnah, it has a hint of rebuke. He's telling to the people, these are the three main areas that you should be working on.
Is it saying that you or he has to come to it inside himself first before he can?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to text 4.
This Mishnah in Avot 1:18 seems to suggest different carriers upon which the word stands.
Let's read the other one.
Differentiate between this Mishnah, which discusses the three things to which a person can achieve a level of perfection, which justifies creation and its continued existence, and 1:18, which delineates three other attributes necessary for functional society.
Okay, so what does Avot 1:18 says? No, I didn't put it, but it's another three pillars. Three pillars mentioned there.
The crown. It's numbered differently.
Yeah, each book is another thing.
Here, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, okay, says, on three things the world stands: on judgment, on truth, and on peace. That's why he says that there is another one. And he learned it from the book of Zacharias. That says, judge truth and the justice of peace in your gates. So,
That's one of the readings from page 12, 13, and 14 in Slim Sim in the morning. This
Okay.
particular one.
So basically, Yeah. Okay, so what happened is this Rabbi Menachem ben Solomon Meiri, what he's saying is, don't get confused, because there is another Mishnah, the 118, that is also talking about three different pillars, three things. But it says, according to his understanding, the other Mishnah in 118 is talking about things that they are necessary for every society to function. This Mishnah that we are studying now is talking about the individual. They're two different things. Okay, so we're talking about the individuals. Even though, as we are going to see in the other commentaries, the other rabbis are implying that even though 118 is for a society, 1:2, the one we are reading today, applies to the entire world. It's beyond society. Yes, for society to be functional, you need to have judgment, truth, and peace. And actually, they see a progression there. Judgment, truth, and peace. You cannot have peace if you don't have truth. It's a progression. Okay, but this one, they would say that if we don't have Torah, Avodah, and Milut Chasadim, there will be no world. The world cannot exist without those three things. Yes.
Okay. The world couldn't exist without Torah, sacrifice in the temple, and act of loving kindness. So that means the world couldn't exist without Judaism.
Without which?
Say again?
Without Judaism.
Because Torah is just for the Jews.
Yep.
Wow. It was once upon a time, now the world is changed. We cannot really make it absolute.
No, but this is something that it has some kind of truth.
Yes.
The statement.
Genesis.
That's how things started, but, yeah.
In the beginning was the word. That's Torah.
But it would say that that's why Judaism survived for so many centuries. It's as guarantors that the Torah will still be shining in the world. It's the covenant. That's what it is. So let's keep reading. The next one. Let's define a few things, and then we were going to focus on specifically on prayer. But it's also mentioning other two things that we have to study as well. John.
On the Torah, the historical event of the giving of the Torah, if Israel had not accepted the Torah, the heavens and the earth would not have been created.
Aha. So this is a totally different interpretation. When it says, ala Torah, it's not talking about the study of Torah, according to this rabbi,
No.
but
It
the
is
fact
the
that
Torah
God
itself.
gave the Torah.
Exactly.
So basically what it says is, it's not about you studying Torah. It's about the fact that God gave the Torah. The fact that God gave the Torah, just by the act of
The
giving the
physical
Torah,
act.
there is already one
Exactly.
pillar.
Yeah.
One pillar sustaining the world. Why? Because God gave the Torah.
That's right.
The other two are up to us. But the first one happens once, and that's solid. The Torah is already there, so there is
Everything
one
comes
pillar.
from there.
But, so that's according to the Talmud. But you will see that not all the rabbis agree with that. Other rabbis will say, no, it's about the commitment and the study of the Torah, the one that builds and fortifies and preserves the pillar sustaining the world. It's not a historical event, it's a day-to-day thing. Why? We learn it by analogy because of the other two things. Prayer and good deeds is something that we have to do every day. So applying the same logic, Torah, as mentioned in the Mishnah, is not something that happens once in the past, it's something that happens every day.
Well, in physics, everything is now. There's only,
No, that's not true.
outside of time, everything's now. In the absolute, in that sense, like
Okay.
Torah is now, it's always.
But Torah is, we believe that Torah gets revealed every day. And you have to receive the
Yeah.
Torah every day, again and again and again and again. That's why, for example, once a year we celebrate Shavuot, which is 50 days after Pesach, and Shavuot has another name, Zman Matan,
Torah.
Zman Matan Torah, the time of the giving of the Torah. Why not the time of the receiving of the Torah? Because
That's
God
what you
gave the
said,
Torah,
yeah.
it's up to you to receive it.
That's right.
We can't celebrate that you received the Torah because you don't know if you received the Torah or no. The only thing we know as a fact is God gave it. Receive it or not, it's up to you. That's why the holiday is called the time of the giving.
Love. That's love.
Some people will receive it, some people won't, but it was given. So,
But we all have the capacity to receive.
yes, that's correct. Yeah. Text C, 6. Very good.
Since the next two of the three principles, service of God and acts of loving kindness, imply directives rather than statements of history, it would be incongruent to understand on the Torah as a historical event rather than as another directive. Therefore, on the Torah means the duty of studying Torah.
Okay, we just said, let's keep moving, text 7. Are you?
Oh, me? Oh.
Text 7, yeah.
Okay, on the service of God, this refers to the sacrificial service performed in the temple. Upon the destruction of the temple, this service was supplanted by prayer and study of the laws regarding the temple service.
Okay, so that's a fact. When the temple was destroyed, the sacrifices were replaced. If you come to a Jewish service, the specific prayer that replaces sacrifices is called the Amidah, or Shmone Esrei. That's another way we have to call it. But sometimes we forget that the other thing that the Rabbi said that we should do to replace the sacrifices is to read about the sacrifices every day, which in conservative synagogues we usually skip it, but it's in the Siddur, in the early parts of the service. Actually, it's not even the Siddur anymore, I believe.
Not
No,
the
it was,
Slim Sim.
it was edited. If you
Not
open
the
an
Slim
Orthodox
Sim.
Siddur, there is a whole section at the beginning with a description of the sacrifices of the day and the laws of sacrifices, and they read it every morning. That was part of the deal of not having the sacrifices, but we read about the sacrifices every day. If you go to Israel, there are a group of people that they actually train themselves. They're priests, they're Kohanim. They train themselves to be ready for the third temple. And they study. They get trained on how to perform the sacrifices. That's the next level, because they're Kohanim. But for the rest of us, we should study about them and to have the Amidah every day. And that equals somehow the sacrifices. But, nevertheless, and have this in mind because it's going to come back in the text, the Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah said specifically sacrifices, or avodah, which is sacrifices. Yeah, the Rabbi may have changed it after, but that's not what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah doesn't say it. Ala Torah, ala avodah, or whatever you have, we have Milut Chasadim. It says ala havodah. So that means that if you don't have avodah, one of the three legs is weaker.
Could you make the argument, there's lots of holes in it, but could you make the argument that collecting of tzedakah in the morning, during the morning service, that is in lieu of sacrifice, or not?
Not in this context.
Okay,
He's talking about the prayer.
okay.
Did the rabbis that redacted the Mishnah around 215, that is of course after the temple was destroyed, did they believe that the temple would be rebuilt
Yeah,
within a
Yeah.
reasonably short period of time?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, in fact, there were people after the Roman destruction, there were people who stayed there and they tried to do it, but it failed once again.
They were always hoping that it would happen in their time.
Yeah.
Who was it? Wasn't that Gedalia?
Yep. The Feast of, Feast of
We do it because he
Yeah.
was the one after, there was like a
When-
spark of hope and then he,
Yeah.
But wasn't Gedalia after the first temple was destroyed?
I think that. hold
There's
on.
the fast of there's a fast.
There's a feast and then there's a fast.
Oh, the feast.
Not the Gedalia. There was
Oh, the
one,
fast of Gedalia. That was
because
the
we
first
have
temple
two.
the governor
Yeah.
was assassinated.
Yeah.
Then we have the 10 of Tebet. It was one that was, I don't remember which one it is, because there was a pocket of Jews that they tried to rebuild Jewish life in Jerusalem after the destruction of the Second Temple. They even tried to revive the Sanhedrin, but they failed.
Is this Bar Kokhba?
Yeah, but then after the rebellion, that's it. The only hope they had disappeared. It was gone.
But
That was the
didn't-
last hope.
But didn't the
You're
Sanhedrin
suffering, right?
exist in Yavne, or they didn't have capital, they couldn't
Yes.
operate as a criminal court, but didn't they, wasn't there a Sanhedrin and that,
Yeah, but they couldn't start. They couldn't keep it because they didn't have the scholars. Remember, the Jews now were scattered everywhere.
well, I thought there was some sort of Sanhedrin, after Yochanan ben Zakkai, for a couple
Mhm.
hundred years.
But then they disappeared. Everything moved. Basically, the big academies were in Babylonia,
Oh.
and from there they expand everywhere else.
Was Yehuda Nasi from the land of Israel or from Babylonia, or both? He traveled back and forth.
Those travel back and forth. Actually, you will see them mentioned in the two Talmuds, visiting all the other. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going.
For sages taught that the commandment to serve him with all your heart, Deuteronomy 11:13, alludes to prayer, which is service of the heart.
Okay, see, now the Talmud is trying to justify the fact that prayer is also a sort of avodah.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's an alternative. It's not the real deal. It's not the real deal, which is very foreign for us because if tomorrow the third temple gets rebuilt and we have to go back to Jerusalem to make sacrifices, I will say that most people will be uncomfortable with that.
But we could talk about the definition of prayer. There's all kinds of prayer.
Oh, no, of course.
Yeah.
But this is beyond prayer. This is an experience that we don't know it because we never did it.
There's
We
nothing
haven't done it
There's
in
nothing in our
centuries.
generational memory other than
We haven't done it
what's written.
in centuries. The thing that taking an animal and kill it in front of an altar, and
It is foreign to our current way of living.
and nevertheless, if for any reason tomorrow we have a temple again, that's what is supposed to happen.
Wasn't Maimonides, didn't
That's
he?
why I don't know.
Oh, yeah, the discussion.
No.
If that ever happens, the discussion
Messiah
between
hasn't come yet.
you see the discussion between the right and the left in Israel right now will be nothing compared with the kerfuffle that's going to be if there is a temple tomorrow.
Isn't there a group of fanatics in Israel that the police are always afraid of? They're afraid that somebody's, God forbid, going to destroy,
Yeah.
the mosques to.
No, because they can't do it. The thing is, and I understand that part when they are waiting for the Messiah to rebuild it, because first, they don't really know where it is. We don't know the exact location. We know around where it is, but it's supposed to be, the Holy of Holies is supposed to be in a very specific location. It's almost like the X marking the pirate map. It has to be there. Where is it? We don't know. That's why Jews are not allowed to enter to the Dome of the Rock. Because who was the only one who was allowed to enter to the Holy of Holies space?
Kohen Gadol.
If you're not a Kohen Gadol, and if you go to the Dome of the Rock just as a visitor, and it happened to be that place, you're violating a commandment from the Torah. But it says that only the high priest will enter there. Because it's that same physical space, even though it's not, The Holy of Holies is not there, but it's the, you know, if you know anything about phones or GPS, is the geolocation of the Holy of Holies, which we don't know what it is, but it's somewhere within the Dome of the Rock.
Muhammad
What's
went there.
interesting is when I was in
Yeah.
Israel, not that long ago, just a couple of years ago, and you go, I went through the tunnels.
Yeah, but
They were-
that's far
so-
removed.
No, wait, there is a theory, or I don't know what label you want to put on it, but they take you to a place, that there are some study halls underneath, and you can see them through glass, and only Kohanim are allowed to go in there. But further down, there is a niche, and they firmly believe that that actually is the spot.
Okay,
Based on what?
and there was
Wow.
another
Belief.
scholar in Israel. There is a scholar, I saw a documentary on
There's no
TV,
archaeology.
that he insists that the temple was located not where the Dome of the Rock is now, but it was next to it. And there is a-
Yes.
So basically, it could be built there, and there was a very interesting theory, but he was alone.
Yes. I
Yeah.
think that's in the general region
His-
of this
his
area
fun-
niche that they are
His fan
pointing out.
club was about 10 people.
Wasn't there a time when some of the rabbis prohibited Jews from entering the entire Temple Mount because, you know, they,
Out of fear that you might step on the place
yeah.
of the Holy of Holies by
But
mistake.
these are recent things, because I remember my dad was there in 1970, and he visited the Omar Mosque and the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
It's all recent, yeah,
It's all
relatively.
recent, I mean, started, I don't know, late 70s or 80s. Like, the situation was so relaxed between the Arabs and Israelis there that.
Yeah, but this
you
is
can't
beyond.
compare.
But this
Oh,
is
yeah.
beyond the any conflict. It's for religious reasons.
Yeah, I know, but at that time,
Oh, in the
Israel was
seventies
not
and even
religion.
even in the eighties,
Yes, yeah.
that everything was very
Yeah.
fluid,
Yes.
going back and forth.
There are
Yes,
the
it was.
Haredim in Jerusalem a little bit, but all Israel was not religious. All started. It started
All
in the
Israel still
70s
is not religious.
with the American immigration
Yes.
from Brooklyn.
Yeah, well, that's another, this is an underamizing.
Yeah.
So let's continue with the next one. Text 9. Ruth, is it you?
Prayer can be even more effective than sacrifices in seeking forgiveness for the episode of Bathsheba. King David says, Psalm 51:18, "For you do not desire a sacrifice, and a scent offering you do not want," since David's sin was intentional. An offering could not atone for it. Now that I cannot bring a sacrifice, David continues, "My Lord, Hashem, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Accept my IBD 17. Accept my prayers in place of a sacrifice. Grant me pardon and forgive my sin."
Okay. So it's now this rabbi is making a case for prayers actually being more powerful than sacrifices.
Intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. It is related to intention. We are going to see that in a minute. We are going to talk about intention versus fixed prayer. That will be with the next Mishnah.
Yeah.
That will be with the next one. That is Avot chapter 2, Mishnah 18. But not yet. Not yet. Okay? So bear in mind that so far we have arguments for pretty much three things. Number one, that sacrifices are the best way. Number two, I would say that it could be replaced, but number three is actually no, prayers are superior than sacrifices. Let's keep moving. Let's talk a little bit about act of loving kindness.
And upon act of loving kindness. This is based on the verse in Psalm 89:3. "For I said, the world will be built through kindness, unquote. It is rabbinically ordained positive commandment to visit and inquire after the welfare of the sick, to remove the dead for burial, to bring the bride to the wedding canopy, to accompany departing guests, and to be involved with all burial preparations, including carrying beer, eulogizing, digging the grave, and burial. Similarly, included in the rabbinic injunction is gladdening the hearts of bride and groom. Even though all these mitzvahs are rabbinically ordained, they are included in the biblical mitzvah, you shall love your fellow as yourself, Leviticus 19. This means that all things that you want others to do for you, you should do for one who is considered your brother in Torah and mitzvah. Through the pursuit of Torah knowledge, Torah, exemplary character traits, and fulfillment of the mitzvah, the world will achieve a balanced perfection.
Okay, this is interesting, and it's not a coincidence that it's Maimonides, the one saying this. He's trying to explain from a logical point of view what each one of these three concepts mean, or how they serve as a pillar. Because he said, upon three pillars the world gets sustained. But how? What is each one of these three things? What's the contribution of each one of these three concepts? So Maimonides here is brilliant. He said Torah means knowledge. Okay? Milut Chasadim, act of loving kindness, means exemplary character traits. And Avodah, that before was translated either sacrifices or prayer, Maimonides brings a different translation, and he says mitzvot, commandments. So for Maimonides, the three pillars are knowledge. So Torah is just is the starting point. It's not just Torah; it's knowledge, which we saw it in Maimonides' life. Maimonides, he wasn't happy just with studying Torah. What else did he study?
Medicine.
Dr. Goldman, you're an expert on Maimonides. What else did he study? But it was something else. Philosophy.
Yes.
He didn't study philosophy from the Torah. He went actually to Muslim teachers to learn philosophy. He didn't care, but it was all about knowledge. Next one is not just what we call milut chasadim, act of loving kindness, but everything that involves refining your traits of character. This is something that you will see between Pesach and Shavuot. We have these 50 days that we call the counting of the Omer, and the idea is to learn a trait of character per day, or to study, to analyze it, to meditate on it. So you're ready to receive the Torah at the end, because Torah by itself is useless unless that you become a good person.
Could you say that we're talking about some form of spiritual cleansing?
Oh, he's not talking about spiritual cleansing. He's talking about
In
behavior.
order in order to become more
evolved.
No, but I will tell you what happened.
Not evolved.
And I will tell you what I think this is all about. If you don't prepare yourself before to study Torah, you're going to use the Torah to justify your evil.
That's right. And so I guess what I'm suggesting is that by engaging in, I don't know what else to say, if it's not some kind of inner clarification, in order to be more present as one approaches the Torah, as we a less imperfect human being.
Okay?
Yes? No? I don't.
Yes, but Maimonides seems to imply that it is independent from the Torah. Because the fact that he's mentioning, it said, Torah knowledge,
Yep.
exemplary character traits. Why is he listing that separately from Torah? Isn't that part of the Torah?
I would say it's all part.
He said no. He said no, because you don't learn that from the Torah. Let me tell you a principle, and this is universal principle for every religion.
Is it
You're
because-
always going to use your holy book to justify your behavior. You're going to make it fit.
And he argued against that.
No, but basically,
Rationality.
if you're a good person and you have a good heart, if you basically, if you're a bad person, you're going to use the Torah to do evil, and you're going to
Justify your
justify it.
actions, yeah.
But if you're a good person, you're going to
don't
justify
need to
your
do that.
good on Torah. That's what he wants. When you read the Torah with a good heart, with a pure heart, what are you going to see there?
Only good can come
Only
of
good
it.
thing, only good will come
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah, but
And
it
that
takes-
happened with any holy book. You could see that, every religion had that kind of things. It happened with the Crusades. It happened with ISIS. Right?
It's
It
true. You
depends
can
how you
justify
read it.
any
You
action
will justify
by-
it. So everything depends your starting point. If you start reading your book with an evil heart, don't expect that the book will change you.
Well, no, it's all distortion.
You're going to change the book.
Distortion.
So Maimonides will say that, and the rabbis agree with this in Maimonides. You have to change yourself. You have to be a good person without Torah. Forget about Torah. Be a good person first. Then read the Torah. So there are two different things here.
I don't think you can separate that the way you're saying. I really don't. I need you to.
We see it.
talk some more.
We see it all the time. People that they are religious people but bad people. How is that possible?
Well, they're not really religious. then. They're
Well,
By whose
they
definition?
claim-
Yeah.
By
Well,
whose
but
definition?
Yeah.
They read the Torah every day. How is it possible?
I know.
But how is it possible? If the Torah is supposed to change you,
I see.
how is it possible that they are
See,
evil
okay,
and they
you're
study Torah
clarifying
every
that,
day?
okay.
Unless
Yeah.
that being a good person is separate from studying Torah. And that's what it says here. That's what it said. You need the two columns. You
Okay.
need Torah and you need act of loving kindness, and this separate. They're independent.
You see, where I was coming from was, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So I was thinking you were part of that, and you're, being human being, we're polluted. All our life, we are trying to get more pure
Mhm.
for unity with God. So that whole process of doing acts of kindness, yeah.
So that's where the rabbis go. Like,
You have to
it's-
spend your
it's
life
going parallel.
attempting to be
Yeah,
a good
that's-
person and be
That's what I was saying.
of good heart in order to be able to approach the Torah, to be able to understand what the Torah is giving you. If you cannot do that, cannot achieve that, cannot work in your life towards that, then you won't get what the Torah has to give you. You won't get the benefit of it. You'll just stay, let's say, with your feet rooted in the mud.
So,
I
yeah,
have
but.
a question here.
Yes, John.
It says, acts of loving kindness to your brother in Torah. So how about the strangers?
Yeah.
Well, the Torah talks about treating strangers.
Yes,
That you
the-
treat the stranger as you treat other.
Well, that's a big part of Judaism, welcoming the stranger.
Yeah, there's a specific mitzvah for that. Yeah.
Not to be a good person if you're not studying Torah?
Say that again, please.
If you could be a good person, yeah, you
Not to be a
could.
good person
Of course.
if you
Yeah.
don't study Torah?
Yeah.
Of course. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good people outside Judaism.
But if you are to,
Yeah, you could be a good person without studying Torah, yes. I think you will be incomplete because you could, once you reach that level, then you have the perfect soil to plant the Torah and to bear fruits without starting with a good heart, without that starting point. It's like not having fertilized soil before you plant the seed.
You know, there's one interesting thing here that I don't quite understand, and I'm sure it must mean something. He doesn't say the world will achieve perfection. He says the world will achieve a balanced perfection.
Well, I think it's trying to use the same language because the way it says "Aulam Omed," it means that it's sustained. It's like, so the balance means that.
It always talks about the world rests on, the Torah rests on.
yeah.
It's not.
I think it's trying to use the same image, right? It's like this.
It's not firmly planted.
Yes.
If one is missing, then it can
It's
be sustained, or
precarious.
it will be.
Yeah.
Time, space.
Okay.
It will be how do you call it? Tilted.
Tilted, yeah.
Off kilter.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm gonna read on.
Yeah. Acts of kindness.
Acts of kindness are greater than charity, since they can be done for both the rich and the poor, while charity can be given only to the poor. Charity can only be done with one's money, while acts of loving kindness can be performed both personally and with one's money. Acts of benevolence toward the wealthy include providing them loans when needed and offering them sound advice. Included in the dictum of practice kindness is the need to be selective when offering help, to give preference to God-fearing, modest persons.
Interesting that Maimonides suggests that, huh?
I'm
Very
confused. It says acts of benevolence toward the wealthy?
Yeah,
Would it
it's
not be from the wealthy?
no, towards. It basically means that you can even do acts of kindness to the wealthy.
Like
We've
Deutsche
done
Bank
for both
when
rich
they
and poor.
Yeah,
gave Trump a loan.
Yeah. Okay. Text 11.
It doesn't have to cost
We
money.
have to laugh sometime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lourdes.
When we're quoting Maimonides, there's a lot more to what he had meant, where he is trying to interpret the Torah to us, and we're trying to interpret what his interpretation is.
Yeah.
Trying to understand what he was saying, yes.
Well, remember that happened with the Mishnah. The Mishnah was written so we can know the will of God. And then nobody understood it, so they needed the Gemara, and then we had the Talmud. And then nobody understood the Talmud, so we have people, if you open the Talmud, you will have all these commentaries around the Talmud. And then you have books written about the commentary of the commentary.
Yeah. And so it goes.
And so it goes,
Still-
and we
and
have more
still-
layers.
Yeah, the way of the world, yeah.
And I believe that is deliberate.
I think sometimes what happens is it's very difficult for us to put everything in the right context. Many of the things that Maimonides said at the time were appropriate for his context.
And he also said he would expect it to change with time.
It's alive.
Yeah, so
Correct.
Yeah, it's
Right.
alive.
yeah, like many of the
It can be
things, for
current.
example, when it's talking about the difference between doing kindness to a neighbor or doing kindness to a foreigner, right? Well, it's coming from the reality that, go back to the Middle Ages, for example, when this was written. I don't think they felt the need to be kind to people that they were not Jews,
Yeah.
because all they got from them was what?
Misery.
Misery. So they became a close community, and they realized, well, if we don't help each other, nobody will. So they decided to interpret love your neighbor as the one that is like a riacha in Hebrew, but the one that is like you.
And now we're taking refugees from all
But
over the world.
it's a definition that is dynamic, that it eventually change, the concept was broadened. But it's interesting, but just to be sure that we will never have an interpretation that is exclusively to the one that is like you. The Torah added purposely other verses to protect the people that they are not like you. That's why it's a separate law.
Isn't there a concept of Darchei Shalom, the ways of peace, that if an organized Jewish community is supposed to provide benefits to the non-Jews within, to...
Yeah, but why? For the sake of peace.
Yeah.
But even that is kind of
And
an excuse.
isn't there another concept of Kiddush Hashem and Hil Hashem?
Oh, that's different.
If you do something for the benefit out of kindness to a non-Jew, they'll say, well, look, that's the way the Jews believe, that must be the way their God believes,
Yes, but to say that you
One would
will
hope.
you will do something just for the sake of peace, it doesn't mean that you do it because you believe in it. You do it because you don't want anybody to be. How can I say it
It's almost
nicely?
a defense mechanism.
Yeah, but you don't want them to be pissed off at you, so they will attack you. So you do it to preserve the peace, not because you believe it's the right thing. So yeah, it's kind of you have to be careful when you read something that said you have to do it for the sake of peace. It doesn't say you do it because it's the right thing. You do it for the sake of peace, to preserve the peace. So nobody will get offended.
But an act of kindness is usually always the right thing to do, irrespective of...
Of course.
For
Yeah,
A
and
stranger's
in
house.
fact, the Torah doesn't really regulate act of kindness. It's one of the things that you do it
It's
the way
very
you feel it.
open-ended.
It's open-ended. The way you feel, the way you do it.
Well, we're talking about human rights here, aren't we? Like human rights, because we all have the spark of God. You should be treating everyone with at least the minimum amount of dignity because they're a human being.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we're all children
I'm sorry.
of God.
You know, when you're talking about interpretation, I'd like to find something, not Maimonides, but anything, anywhere that doesn't require interpretation. Any of your books, you read it, I read. There wouldn't be book clubs if everything you read didn't require
We all had
interpretation.
exactly the same
you
And
read-
conclusion
sometimes,
from
sometimes interpretations are funny. You know that I'm a fan of Star Wars. And I was reading online, because it's Star Wars, I don't know if you ever watch it, that they have these lightsabers.
Yep.
So they have this two group of people. One is the Jedis,
Yeah.
the good guys, and the Sith, the bad guys. The Sith,
It's the same.
they all have red lightsabers. The Jedi, they have it either green, blue, or yellow. Some guards, some specific, they have the yellow. But it's this guy in the movie. His name is Mace Windu, but he has a purple one. Oh, everybody on the internet, why is it purple? It's because maybe he's not really a Jedi, but he's not really a Sith,
Yeah,
right?
we don't know the
Must have been a
gender.
mixed marriage.
Yeah, and then actually, they asked it's Samuel Jackson, right? They asked him why the purple. He said because I wanted one. He said that if he didn't, he said the condition he put is I want a purple lightsaber. And George Lucas at the time said, no, you cannot do that because the Jedi use it either green or blue. No, sorry, I want a purple one. But you cannot do that. It's not part of the history. So sorry. And the most famous actor in the saga, I want a purple lightsaber. And George Lucas said, okay. But then everybody else were trying to understand why maybe he wasn't there. Oh God, it was just because the actor wanted one. There is no reason. There is no supernatural reason just because the guy was stubborn and he came out with the idea that his lightsaber will have to be purple.
It's
Do you realize you could be one of the world's greatest Torah scholars if you spent the
It's-
time studying
it's-
Talmud
it's-
instead of Star Wars?
It's, you mean Star Wars isn't part
I
of it?
haven't thought about
You mean
that.
that Star Wars doesn't have a Talmudic appendage?
Well, I guess if the Talmud will be presented in movies,
Oh, you could.
right? Or the animated series. Because basically what I'm doing now, I have Netflix and I'm going through there is this cartoon series that is called the Clone Wars. And I have to hurry up because there are 6 seasons and I got a notification that it will be available only until the end of July. And then it's going to be taken. So every night I watch at least one episode because I don't want to.
You don't want to miss out.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to this. Next.
11. This triad describes various aspects of a human relationships. Torah includes the intellect pursuits that fulfill man, such as study of Torah and the cultivation of its basic beliefs. These are integral to man's relationship to himself. Services refers to the performance of commandments through which man serves God. Kindness encompasses all men's interpersonal relationships.
Okay, so relationship with others. So in other words, what it says, according to this rabbi, he will say that Torah represents basically all what you study to make yourself better. Avodah represents your connection with God, and Milut Chasadim represents your connection to others. 3 different connections: to yourself, to God, and to others.
Isn't that the definition of shalom?
Well,
Why?
The fullness of peace.
Yeah.
You become peace.
Well, this is basically this is basically self-perfection, connection with God, and connection to others. Almost like a song, like a dance, right? I can choreograph.
It's a
that.
triad.
I can choreograph.
YMCA?
YMCA, that's what it was, yes. YMCA. Right?
yeah.
Could it be that? Okay. 12.
These 3 pillars of creation, Torah, service of God, and acts of loving kindness, are symbolized respectively by the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Since these 3 foundations support the world at large, they are mirrored in the person of the 3 pillars of the Jewish nation, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham personified the trait of kindness as expressed by his outstanding hospitality. Isaac embodied service to God by submitting himself as a sacrifice at the
Akedah, the
Akedah.
binding, when he was about to be killed by his father.
He unleashed the nation potential for service as expressed through offering and prayer. Our sages taught on the day that Abraham placed his son Isaac on the altar, God established the continual offering, Korban Atamid. Jacob is described in the Torah as Yishtam Yoshev Ohalim, a man of simplicity and wholesomeness, abiding his stance. This is an allusion to constant Torah study, as evidenced by the 14 years he spent in the Academy of Shem and Ever.
Okay?
Shem
and Ever. This is a part of the Midrash explaining that he actually went to yeshiva. What yeshiva? Where did it say yeshiva? Yeah, he's trying to reconnect. I lost the connection here. Oh well. It happens all the time.
Is there anyone on the other side?
One.
But I thought that was you.
No, it's another one. But I don't know what's going on. The connection is. So I tried to use this, but it wouldn't work either. Okay, so long story short, to say the 3 pillars are represented by the 3 patriarchs. If you wanna, this was taught by the Maharal of Prague. If you go and read his book, I went, and from there the 3 patriarchs at the same time represents the three columns of the tree of life. If you ever study Kabbalah, you will see that the tree of life has 3 sides: the right, the left, and the middle. The right is Abraham, the left is Isaac, and the middle is Jacob. A long story short, the right represents kindness, which is Abraham. The left represents justice or fear, and is represented by Isaac in the sense of restriction, limits. For example, they were mentioned that Isaac was the only one of the patriarchs that never left the land.
That's true.
Never left the limits of Israel. He was the one who was tied up. So he represents limits. But also fear of God and justice, and think that this is the way it is. Abraham was all the opposite. Abraham was not constriction but expansion. But then you have Jacob in the middle, that is a combination of both. So following the same approach, the value of Torah somehow includes the other two, according to the Maharal. Because at the end of the day, the tree of life, the one that is a combination of the two sides, is the side of Jacob.
Is it a synthesis of the two?
Sorry?
A synthesis of the
It's
two?
a synthesis of the two, and you can tell how it's a combination, because the central one is dual. You have 1, 2, and 3, but the 3 is double because it has from both sides.
Yes.
And you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but Jacob was twin. He was a double.
Yes.
Okay, so but I don't want to be too Kabbalistic there. It's
That's the fun part.
but it's interesting. It's interesting. Why? I have 2 people now, and this thing doesn't want to connect.
I like the way they have simple and wholesomeness. Sort of what you're saying. It's not easy to be simple.
No. Okay, so 13 we read at the beginning, so let's continue with the 14.
The universe can be supported by any one of these 3 pillars of our faith. Even after the abolishment of korbanot, sacrifices, the merit of Torah, or Gemilut Chasadim, was sufficient. In our times, it is through acts of kindness that the world is primarily sustained.
Aha! So this guy is bringing yet a totally different interpretation. He's saying all the other rabbis, you losers, were wrong, or something like that. What he said is, when he reads it, it says, on 3 things the world stands: Torah, service of God, and acts of loving kindness. What he's saying is, it doesn't have to be the 3 simultaneously. The reading that this rabbi has is each one of the 3 can sustain the world. Each one. And he understands that in this generation, the only thing that is sustaining the world is act of loving kindness, because he realized sacrifices are gone.
But Torah is not.
But not in those days. Who will study Torah in those days?
The Hasidim.
But only a few people. But everybody else, the merits of the world are the act of loving kindness that people were performing. And he believed that the only reason why the world was sustained in those days was not because everybody was a scholar, not because everybody was making sacrifices, because sacrifices didn't exist anymore, was because of the acts of loving kindness.
Chesed was the one thing that remained.
That remained.
Chesed was the one thing that was constant and remaining
Yes,
throughout.
according to him. But it's a very interesting interpretation, because he is contradicting all the other rabbis. All the other rabbis, with little modifications, little difference between one or the other, what they were saying is we need the 3. Torah,
They couldn't
Avodah,
conceive.
Gemilut Chasadim, the 3.
They couldn't
It's like a tripod. This rabbi said, no. It's not a tripod. What it means is each one of them is a support by itself.
That's pretty radical thinking when you think he's doing that in the 1700s.
Yeah?
I think they're saying the same thing, like simplicity and wholesomeness. It's all one.
So, interesting. Let's go to the next one. Now we are moving to Avot 2:18.
Rabbi Shimon says, be careful in the reciting of Shema and praying. When you pray, do not make your prayer fixed, rather prayers for mercy and supplication before the omnipresent, blessed be he, as it says. For he is gracious and merciful, long-suffering and full of kindness, and repents of the evil, and do not be wicked in your own eyes.
Great.
Not in the eyes of God, but in your own eyes, because if you're wicked in your own eyes, then
Well, we'll see. We'll see
Ed.
what it says there. At first, it says, be careful in the recitation of Shema and praying, but actually it says, Shema utfilah. Tfilah means the Amidah. That was the language that the Mishnah will use to talk about the Amidah, the central prayer.
Yeah.
Is Tfilah. We say Hamidah or Shmone Ezra, but the Talmud call it Tfilah. In these days, modern Hebrew Tfilah means prayer in general. Back in the day, Tfilah means that specific prayer, what we call the Amidah in these days. Okay? So who was this Rabbi Shimon? Because remember, the first rabbi was also Rabbi Shimon. It was Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik. Is this the same guy? No. Text 16, I will read it. This is Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel. Little is known about this second generation Tana. Who was a Tana?
Ones who memorized the Mishnah before it was redacted.
Tanaim were the rabbis during the time of the Mishnah.
Yeah.
The Talmud didn't exist yet.
Yeah, before the Mishnah. They're theoretically they're supposed to have memorized all the Mishnah before they were.
So he was a Kohen, a priest, and he was the son-in-law of Rabbi Gamliel Azaken. Okay, Rabbi Gamliel Azaken. He was the famous one. Okay, text 17. Who's next? Eddie.
He warns us here to be punctual in reading the Shema and in praying at the proper time. There are set times for the reading of the morning and evening Shema and for the Amidah, and here Rabbi Shimon urges the Jews to be meticulous in adhering to those schedules. The morning Shema must be recited during the first quarter of the daylight hours, and the morning Amidah must be recited during the first third of the daylight hours. The evening Shema must be recited after nightfall. The afternoon Mincha prayer should be recited sometimes between a half hour after midway and sunset, and the evening Ma'ariv must be recited after nightfall.
Okay, so basically, according to Rashi, what this guy is saying is let me read again the exact words that he's using. It says, Avei Zahir v'kriyat Shema u'batfilah. Be careful in the reciting of Shema and the Amidah. According to Rashi, what he's saying is be careful when you say it, not how you say it, but when you say it. Because I guess Rashi is understanding that understanding the Mishnah in the context. And maybe in that time it was a problem that people wouldn't pay attention when they were recited, and there are very specific rules on when you can say it. In fact, you have to, if you don't come to synagogue, you want to do it by yourself, you have to rely on an app that you can get in your phone that will tell you up to what time you can recite the Shema. Let me give you an example for the day. You have it? There's Manim. Today is Wednesday, March 27th. Earliest Tefillin and Shema. So the earliest you could say the Shema this morning was, I guess?
Earliest?
Earliest.
So, 7:30.
Nope.
No.
6:12 a.m.
Oh, that's the sunrise?
The sun doesn't rise at 6:12.
And what is the latest you can say it?
This
The
is
Shema. Latest.
Well, it should be the first third, and there's 12 hours of daylight, so it's 4 hours. 4 hours later. It should be, 10 o'clock.
No, 9:30 a.m.
Excuse me, yeah.
It's at 9:30 a.m. is the latest Shema. Oh no, you're right. It's there are two opinions. The other opinion is 10:25. Yeah, 10:25.
Because we just had solstice, right?
And the latest
Not
time.
solstice, yeah.
The
12
la-
hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness.
And the
So a
latest time
third
you
of
can
that
say-
is 4 hours. I used to be good at math.
The latest time you can say the Amida in the morning is 11:28 a.m. Then it's already Mincha. So you have to be. So then the earliest Mincha is 2:05. Mincha Ketana is 5:14. Plaga Mincha, which is the latest time for Mincha, is 6:32. Very interesting.
I can remember.
The Sha'az Manit, it says here at the bottom, every hour at this time of the year is 1 hour and 2 minutes, according to Jewish time.
Yes, because we have to regulate this
We are,
complicated
so
calendar clock.
we are pre-balanced.
This calculator.
We are
complicated
pre-balanced. In the
calendar.
middle of the winter could be 45 minutes every hour.
Oh,
But in the middle of the summer could be hour and a half every hour.
I remember when in Borough Park, and I'm not far from the shul, you can see people running to shul at literally 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning because they haven't finished yet.
Oh.
And they have to get there before Shachrit.
Okay.
So people are constantly fitting in their attendance at shul when they can't make it because they're working or whatever else is going on. It's really bizarre.
Okay, let's continue because this is, I put it there because it was Rashi is pretty much
ultra-Orthodox world is
alone
weird.
with interpretation of the Mishnah, that this Mishnah is telling us when, not to how
It's a
to do
huge
it.
adjustment.
Most
We don't
rabbi
live
will
in it
try to
anymore.
deal with the how, not with the when. Next, text 18.
The Mishnah is not concerned at all with the obligation to recite the prayers, nor with the duty to pray at the prescribed time. Rather, the Mishnah speaks of the benefit derived from these mitzvot for the consistent and conscious recitation of Shema and prayer help man to develop a strong sense of God's presence and a great desire to relate to Him.
Yeah, so basically what it says is, why would you waste an opportunity to get something wonderful from those two prayers? If you don't do it properly, you're missing an opportunity. So what he's saying is, if you will be aware of all what you can get from those two prayers, you wouldn't just say them, you would pray them. You will invest your entire being to recite those two prayers. And actually, as we are going to see in a minute, they are pointing to two different directions. They fulfill two different things, the Shema and the Amidah. Let's keep reading.
Shema contains many of the main articles of Jewish faith, including belief in the unity of God, the duty both to love and to fear Him, the obligation to study His Torah and to fulfill its commandments, and the doctrine of divine reward and punishment. In the third portion of the Shema, we are taught to be cautious of the forces of desire and heresy, which seek to detour man from the righteous path. Prayer, by its very nature, is an act of faith wherein man recognizes God as the source of all blessing.
Okay? Is that clear? So what do you get from the Shema?
Articles of Jewish faith.
What is the Shema reminding you every day?
Unity of God.
Unity of God.
The duty
And
both
we are,
to love and fear.
yeah, but it's also not just the unity of God, but it's also a reminder every day that we have desires, we have urges, and we have to control them. Okay, now in text 20 we have something very interesting, and this is something that there is a tension that exists even to this day between keva and kavana. There are two words. They're even similar. Keva and kavana. They are similar, but they mean opposite things. In these days, modern Hebrew, keva refers to the fixed prayers. When you open the Siddur, the prayer book, all the prayers there, that is called the keva. Kavanah is the intention. That is what you bring to the synagogue. Okay? The keva is already there for you. Kavanah is what you put into the prayers. It's your intention. How you say, because you can read it. And you can move your body and say, oh, look, he's praying. No, I just have a back pain. You know, the fact that I'm moving doesn't mean that I'm praying. So text 20. Let's read about keva and kavanah.
The word keva connotes a steady obligation one seeks to be rid of, but prayer should never be performed perfunctorily as a burdensome duty that one seeks to be done with.
Interesting, because this rabbi is starting with a background description of the word keva. Keva could mean something that you want to get rid of. But in the context of prayer, you should never take it from that point of view. It's something that is there.
Alternatively, keva is used to mean an establishment amount. Thus, one must never view prayer merely as nothing more than the recitation of a certain number of prescribed verses. He should seek to add his own personal prayer in any language at the proper point in the service to the standard text. Just as one always seeks the right word to elicit a favor from a friend, so he should go beyond the word of the Siddur and express the feelings of his heart to God.
Okay? So basically, both things are important. Keva is important, but it's also important the way you say it. And it's also important that you should go beyond keva and add your own prayers. In these days, I was reading a book from Rabbi Shalom Arush, a Chassid from Israel. He's a follower of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And he says that the best way you can do it is to just, for the sake of simplicity, think that are two different things. You come to pray to synagogue 3 times a day is important, but the main goal of that sometimes is not prayer. And I can tell you, I come here, I lead services, but it's difficult to pray when you have people around you, people are talking, kids are running. They say that's okay. Because when you come to synagogue and you participate in those prayers, you're creating other things. It has other benefits. You're creating community, you're connecting to other people.
You're correcting an environment that is conducive to prayer for many.
So, but what it says is, you can come early. Go there, take a seat, pray to God, talk to God in your own words, or you can stay after. In fact, you go to the Talmud, it says that the pious one used to go to the synagogue or the Beit Knesset or Beit Tefillah, whatever it was those days, and he would pray for an hour before to pray. So they would talk to God for an hour before, they would pray for an hour, and they would talk to God for an hour after. In these days, what the Hasidim do is they talk to God for an hour, a literal hour every day outside the Roman synagogue. If you saw the series Shtisel on Netflix, you will see that they go to the woods to talk to God. Have you seen it?
No, but
There
I
is
know
this
people,
guy.
I've known people who
The
do.
group of friends, they're trying to talk to each other, and then there is another Hasid next to a tree. It says, Tate! Tate! Tate means father in Yiddish. He's yelling to God. But what he's doing is talking to God outside synagogue. It doesn't mean that he doesn't go there 3 times a day. He does. But when he's really praying, when he's doing the Kavanah, is when he's not relying on the Keva. When he can be himself and talk to God like he would talk to a friend.
You can get lost in prayer beyond what's written on the page when you are davening. Not necessarily on Saturday morning, but certainly during morning services. But what's incredibly distracting, and yes, I know silent prayer, you're supposed to say things loud, but sometimes other people's silent prayer is so loud that you can't even concentrate on what you're saying. It's so
So
destructive.
the rabbi said, don't feel bad about that. Just
It's
let the
annoying.
service finish, then you pray to God in your own way with whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And the other problem is
agree.
these days most people will come just Saturday morning, and the liturgy of Saturday morning is not accommodating your personal petition to
No,
God.
it
It was
doesn't.
not designed for
It
that.
doesn't.
You have the other 6 days of the week to ask God for what you want. Then you come Saturday to synagogue and you just praise God.
But you can
But-
petition for healing on Shabbat.
On healing and peace.
But
You
there
can
is during the
petition-
week too.
Yeah, you can
Every day.
petition on healing and peace. But maybe you don't want to petition for healing and peace. You want to petition because your finances are not great. Maybe you want to petition because, I don't know, you have a legal problem. And you come Saturday to synagogue. I said, darn, there's nothing here. Yeah, there's nothing there. The service was not designed for that, but if you came during the week, there are specific paragraphs during the Midah for that.
Yeah, and Shachrit.
About justice.
And also in Mari.
You see, justice, there's a paragraph about finances, there is a specific paragraph about health. Saturday morning we added during the Torah service, but you come during the week, is on the Midah, the prayer for health, and so forth. So forth. So they said, doesn't matter. You talk to God after services or before services. It's up to you. So it's this tension between Keva and Kavanah.
When you say to come in weekday services, in the morning, in the evening, in the
Both.
afternoon?
Both.
Both.
One of them is enough?
Yeah, but those are the ones that they have, the Amida contains the paragraph to petition God whatever you want. Okay, text 21. Who's next?
The water lady.
The water carrier, Harry.
It is not difficult to be meticulous about prayer, in which man makes personal request of God.
Okay, what is he talking about there? What is the prayers in which the person make personal request to God? Which one is that? The Amida. So basically this rabbi said, well, you know what? Maybe it's not so difficult to pray the Amida because we all need something.
All the time.
Well, although the rabbis will correct me, probably, they will say, most people when they pray, they are not praying for what they need, they're praying for what they want.
It's true.
And it,
Unless you pray in God's will.
but they will say the proper prayer is when you come to synagogue praying for what you want, and then you go home knowing what you need. That's the transformation that you could have in synagogue. And realizing that many things that you were asking, that's not what I really need, is what I want. Sorry, so the first line is talking about the Amida. Very important to understand that, yes.
However, the recitation of Shema, which enjoins him to make commitments of love and fear God, and which teaches him to be ready for the ultimate sacrifice on God's behalf, since life without God is not worth living, is more difficult. Therefore, we are taught to be more meticulous in the recitation of Shema, which asks for self-sacrifice, than in our general prayers for personal necessities.
Okay, so this rabbi said, yeah, it's okay that the Mishnah said you have to be meticulous in the recitation of the Amidah, but you can really understand why the rebuke. So said, be meticulous in the recitation of the Shema. Because the Shema is asking a lot from you. Not just recognizing that God is one, but you're also recognizing that you're accepting all the commandments, and so forth. It's more difficult. Next, Ruth.
Can I ask a question? Because it is so difficult to imbue, internalize, and live the Shema, is that the reason why we recite it twice a
Well,
day?
the Torah
Is that
says,
one-
because
yeah.
do it twice a day is because the Torah.
Is that why the Torah says so, do you think?
Good for you.
The-
I think it's working. Huh. It says reconnecting, but it's working. Just wanted to check. Anyway, yeah,
Is it part of the if I forget thee?
I forget thee.
Yeah.
But that's,
it's
I
part-
forget,
If, is this, the constant, the daily, twice a day repetition of the Shema?
no, but it is
part of
because
that?
the Shema itself says you should recite it, when you get up and when you go to bed.
We do.
So that's why we recite it twice a day.
And
Because
before
the
you
Torah said
die,
so.
too.
And before you die, but that's a rabbinic
That's the,
interpretation.
but is that to maintain that connection, that constant connection?
No, but we need a constant,
Here I
first,
go with
yeah,
Martin.
before you, basically it is, you need to be reminded of the unity of God before you go to work and before you go to bed. Because before you go to bed, remember, according to the Rabbi, sleep is like death.
Yeah, a little death, yeah.
It is a little death.
A
So
little
you
death.
remember. I think it's God is with you during your day, and God is with you at night.
I mean, for me, it just, it reinforces Martin Buber, you know, in Ich und Du, I and Thou, in the relationship that one tries to develop between yourself and with Hashem.
Do we know, is there no Shema in the Mincha service?
No, there is
No.
no Shema. No. Okay, text 22.
By describing God this way, the verse alludes to two kinds of prayer: slow to anger, entreaties for divine mercy, asking God to await man's eventual repentance and save him from the punishments he deserves for his sins. Abounding in kindness, requests for divine benefits, even though man does not deserve it. Relentful of punishment, entreaties for atonement of previously committed sins, and of the punishment man should receive for them.
Okay, so that is the description of the verse of Joel that appear in the Mishnah. So this Rabbi is explaining why the author picked that verse and what it means in the context of prayer. Okay, text 23.
A person's standard of behavior is to a large extent influenced by his self-image. One who perceives himself as an evil person has no psychological safety net to prevent him from committing the worst of sins. Quote, I am a wicked person anyway, unquote, he tells himself. Why should I not indulge my base instinct?
Okay, so this is Rambam talking about the last part of the verse where it says you should not consider yourself a wicked person in front of your eyes, or something like that. What it says, do not be wicked in your own eyes. Yeah, that's what it says. So the Rambam, in a very psychological approach, will say, basically, if you consider yourself a bad person by nature, then what is the danger of that?
Self-fulfilling prophecy?
Huh?
A self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah, no, but what he says is that if I'm already a bad person,
What have I got to lose?
what do I have to lose?
What you do then?
Damned if I do and damned if I don't, so
Yeah.
damn it, I will.
I'm already damned,
Yeah.
so I better. So if I'm already going, if somebody is, if I'm already going to hell, I better go to hell happy. So something like that. And Rambam said, no, that's a huge mistake to think that way because you can repent at any time. You can change your behavior. You can change your destiny. You can change the perception God has of yourself.
You can change your own perception of yourself.
Yeah, but you have to start from there.
Uh-huh, yes.
Hasidim has lots to say about that. Reb Nachman. In fact, there are lots of people that use the philosophy of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov to teach how to improve your self-esteem. Because Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, we know that by reading his books and his writings, that he had to deal with very severe demons on his life. More likely he he was bipolar. Now we know. Back in the day,
Yeah.
he has this, and he controlled it with a discipline that he created. It's difficult to replicate, but he was quite successful into that. Next, we have one more text.
Do not allow yourself to be taken in by the erroneous idea advanced by alien philosophies that man must be crushed by the weight of his guilt, and that only through the gracious intercession of another can he be delivered from the burden of his sin. In reality, the only person able to free you from the chains of sin and raise you to the level of pure and free service of God is none other than yourself. Prayer uttered in the proper spirit will be source from which you derive the strength and divine aid that you need in all your efforts to self-liberation from evil.
Great.
Divine aid.
Huh?
I said divine aid.
Yeah, divine aid. Yeah.
It's not yourself.
Yeah. So basically what I said, can you imagine, how can you even pray to God if you think that you're wicked? That's what I said, don't think yourself about that, because otherwise you will never approach God.
That's right. You're never good enough.
You're never good enough. If you think that you're never good enough, God will never listen to your prayers. Not at all. God is always waiting for you. Doesn't matter what you have done. God is always waiting for your prayer. That's the point. Questions?
And self-liberation
Yeah.
from evil.